I got him for Lauren. I just had dinner with the Obama, what did you do? Hop up on Twitter talking about the stuff you don't do. Rock off for Lauren, shawty, cause that is what you gon' do. Sabi out of New Balance, some style.
Third down and 6, right up the gut. That is Gibson, and he is gone. Third of the ball game for the rookie Antonio Gibson.
Farms at the farms, all you hear is oi. One time for BDR, we just try and see you out. I used to be with Nas, beating every city up. Watch who you talking to, I'm respected by the...
Picked up, and Mullins fumbles the football. Washington has it back. Chase Young, they're chasing him down the sideline. And Chase Young has a Washington touchdown.
I've been ungrateful but thankful. I've been ungrateful but thankful. Maybe I got it all too fast and too soon. Been living life, no feelings, no rules. And I've been trying to make it last, make it move. But I'ma hop in this foreign and like a fool. I've been ungrateful, I'm thankful.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Burgundy Network Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Josh Taylor. Joining me today is a panel, as you can tell, of some Washington fans. We will go around the room and announce ourselves. Like I said, I'm Josh Taylor, host of the podcast. Adam.
Adam Aniba from the Burgundy and Gold Report.
Nate Coleman, Jayhawk Chalk from Twitter. What's going on, everyone?
Donovan White, Donnie Mac 98 on Twitter, new to the squad, ready to get going.
Yeah. I'm excited, guys. We are kicking off this Capitol. Obviously, Nate Coleman's part of Full Press Coverage Washington, so check them out also. Always a pleasure to have Nate on. And Adam, you've been on a couple times. But Donovan, the new guy, played D1 football at Miami of Ohio, so just love having his football insight. Won a MAC championship. You should have brought the ring out or something.
No, I got it sitting on the desk over there. Maybe I should bring it out. Who knows?
We're going to do like that Drake song with the rings next time you're on as a little intro song. But anyways, we are here to talk about the Senior Bowl. As everybody knows, I was in Mobile, Alabama this weekend. Had a great time. Phenomenal event. Blew my mind. I've always seen it on TV, but just seeing how everything was put together was definitely something. Jim Nagy is building one heck of a program down there in South Alabama. But got a lot of good notes. Obviously, the draft is coming up. We'll talk about more draft players. But Senior Bowl, let's start with quarterbacks. So breaking news, Matt Stafford's not in Washington. I think we've all accepted that by now, and we're not getting our hopes up with Deshaun Watson. And with this class in the Senior Bowl, it was pretty underwhelming, to be honest with you. I think we would all agree. Compared to last year when you have Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert, who is definitely doing well in the NFL, as everyone could tell, this class really was just underperforming to me. Didn't really have too many guys that I was excited to see. Obviously, Mac Jones, which I will definitely talk about. Jamie Newman was the guy I was really wanting to take a look at just because he opted out, and highly regarded quarterback. Obviously, like I said, transferred to Georgia, ended up not playing due to COVID. And I'll start with him. Watching him, like I said, I just wanted him to prove some stuff to me, and I just left saying his draft stock definitely went down for me. I thought it was going to go up. I thought he was going to remind people who he was at Wake Forest. You know, Sage Surratt's there. He has all these good connections. Like, he's just going to be, feeling it. And you're just like, Jamie, this was your one shot to prove to everybody here that you can be an NFL quarterback. And to me, he just did the opposite. Nate, how much of Jamie did you get to see throughout the game? Did you watch it on Saturday? And how did you leave feeling about him afterwards?
Yeah, so I thought out of all these quarterbacks, Jamin was maybe the guy who could fill that void left by Desmond Ridder when Ridder went back to Cincinnati, just because of the fact that he kind of has a higher ceiling because he's a dual threat quarterback. But, I mean, it was kind of an uneven performance. He kind of showed what he needed to, but it was nothing spectacular. I think, obviously, Kellen Mond helped himself, but I definitely think people overweight the game itself. Whereas like most scouts care a lot more about the interviews and the practice and the medicals. The game is kind of wonky. It has weird rules. It's very vanilla. It's not, I wouldn't read too much into it. Like I think Mon could maybe go at the end of day 2, but I wouldn't take him until like day 3, maybe like round 5, something like that.
Yeah, Jamie Newman to me has all the skills he needs, but he just can't put it all together. I think the one thing that kills him that we saw a lot in practice was just his decision-making was terrible. I mean, he threw like 3 or 4 picks in practice on like one-on-ones, and it's hard to throw picks in one-on-ones. Like if you're a DB and you're getting picks in one-on-ones, like you're doing something great, or Jamie Newman was just throwing the ball. So you definitely don't want your name mentioned in that regard in practice. So like you said, Kellen Mond ended up being the MVP of the game. Looked great. It's been a name that's been thrown around the Washington fan base for a little bit now, just people asking more about him. And it's not like he was a bad quarterback. People saying, well, what does Kellen Mond do that, or Jamie Newman does that he can't do? Like, what's the difference between him and like a Trey Lance? And it's a lot. But the biggest thing to me for Kellen Mond was at A&M, he just wasn't consistent. It was like all the big moments, big games, Alabama, Clemson, he just didn't step up. It's just like you needed to take that step as a quarterback, and he just never did that. Love his frame, love his size, big dude, great arm, great mechanics, everything looks good. Can you clean him up? Possibly. Maybe he just needs more reps. I mean, he feels like he was at A&M forever. But to me, I agree with you. I have him as like an early 4th round grade. Adam, where would you put Mond at if you were to draft him?
He's a poor man's Kaepernick. I just see, little similarities here and there. And I think exactly people get a little overhyped about the game itself. I just kind of watch the game to see little nuances. Yeah. It's the practice videos. That's what I'm really watching a lot. And with him, he shined because the rest was pretty much crap. So I still have him around where I had him around that 4th round. I will have an article about him just because I think Washington fans need to accept that we're probably not going to see an early round quarterback. So you're going to probably looking at day 3 guys. He's not the worst idea. So he's just the beginning of, a couple guys I'll talk about, but I think he did enough to help his stock to put him in the 4th. But I think based on the need, I'm looking across the league. The Rams were one we didn't even have on the list. They said 16 to 17 teams are going to be going for quarterbacks. So in that respect, I think mine's going to get drafted in the 2nd round, somewhere in the 2nd round, just based on need. And, guys like Trask are going to get overdrafted too. Mac Jones, we like Alabama, but I don't think he's a 1st round guy. He'll probably get taken at the end of the 1st.
I forgot who it was. Someone at the Senior Bowl, and there's like videos of it, said he's not going past 8. Which would be nuts to me. That's correct.
That it could, but the wild card I'll say is Justin Fields. I'll throw him in because I'm a guy that just doesn't see him translating to the pros. I think he's an excellent college quarterback. That clap system utilizes what he's good at, but anytime he was really asked to read, he could make some reads, but I just don't see it with him. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone reaches and says, we're going to take Jones as the 4th guy instead of Fields. But man, crazy things have happened, man. We've seen crazy. We've seen Sanchez go. We've seen
Trubisky get traded for the farm.
Absurd quarterbacks go. So I think you're going to see the absurdity before I said 4 to 5 quarterbacks. I think we're going to see 6 quarterbacks in the 1st round now.
That'd be
whoa.
Nuts. That would be. Yeah, it's gonna kick Nate's poor tight ends out of the 1st round. He's pushing for. But Donovan brought up to me. I saw it on Twitter too. Matt Miller had us trading up to 7 to get Fields. Trading only next year's 1st and next year's 3rd and pick 19 to get Fields. So that would be interesting. But he also said the Colts would trade up and get Mac Jones at 10. So a lot of people are leaving the Senior Bowl saying Mac Jones' stock is going up to where he's like a top 15 pick. I still think that's nuts, and I love Mac Jones to death. I will die for Michael McCorkle Jones. But I don't see him as a top 15 pick. Now, pick 19, where we're picking at, if people are putting him in the top 10, if he slips 19, does it feel like a reach anymore to you, Donovan?
You know what? I do think he did a lot of great things at Alabama. I mean, it's from what it sounds like, he's a great leader. He's a great guy. He's kind of a robot in the pocket, I'll be honest. I know he's a fan favorite here, I get it, Crimson Tide. But
I'm going to kick you off, Donovan.
I wouldn't necessarily call it a reach, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a value pick either. There's a lot of analysts that love him and a lot of people that don't. A lot of people kind of in between. That's kind of where I'm at. If he was in the 2nd round, but it doesn't sound like he's going to be, I'd be more than happy to take him there. I don't think he falls that far, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes with the next few months of the offseason leading up to the draft.
Yeah, it's really, to me, going to be what teams are going to start getting desperate and start trading up. A team's going to watch 2 other teams trade up and get Fields or Lance if they slip, and they're like, all right, well, we've got to do something because after Mac Jones, it's Kyle Trask and Jamie Newman. And I would say there's a fall-off, to be honest with you, from Mac Jones to even Trask. I'd say he separated himself. And that's one thing you did leave the Senior Bowl with was Mac Jones was undoubtedly the next guy after those 4. He solidified that. There was no maybe Jamie Newman just goes off and moves back up, or maybe Mac Jones looks terrible. To me, he made the best throw in all the practices. It was a dime to Trey McKitty, the tight end from Georgia. It was all over Twitter. I'm sure everyone saw it, but It's a beautiful pass. He got banged up, didn't play Saturday. Don't blame him. But still, kudos for going out there and practicing. So that's the quarterbacks. Any others really stand out to you? Ian Book, to me, looked just like Ian Book, just ran a lot, depended on his feet way too much. Someone will pick him up just because of his mobility, but outside of that, Ellinger, same with him. Didn't really show me anything that like surprised me. It was just exactly what I've seen him do the last 20 years at Texas.
Yeah.
Was there anyone else quarterback-wise that stood out to anybody else?
No, it was a weak day for that position. And, it's funny you mentioned about Newman. Just keep this in mind. I wrote about him too, and I really have not left the game feeling any different. I still see him in that third, fourth range, pure developmental guy. But guys, man, Richie Grant, man, this guy you'll hear about me saying all offseason. He's become my guy. The safety out of UCF. He picked him off twice. It wasn't just there was one, I think it was easy, but there was another one, man, he just jumped the route. The kid's got instincts, he's got size. So, man, Richie Grant, man, that's my guy. I walk away from that whole weekend. That's the guy I fell in love with.
I believe his name is Richie Rich, actually, because he just made himself a boatload of money. Dude went from maybe a early day 3 pick all the way to a top 50 guy.
Agreed.
I heard an interview from his defensive back coach on, I can't remember what podcast it was. And obviously they're not going to be very biased when they talk about their players. But I mean, what really stood out is just like how cerebral he is. Yeah. Like not only is he instinctual, but he's seen every scheme. He's seen anything that's been thrown at him, and he was the quarterback of the defense. But man, his reaction time is amazing. He's a great leader. He's a vocal leader. He does everything you want. He checks all those boxes. So Richie Rich is, it's hard to say anything bad about him, but this safety class overall is actually really looking up. But before I was really worried about it, but I mean, there's some really strong day 2 guys. And I feel like we say that about offensive line, wide receiver, cornerback, offensive tackle. I mean, there's so many, it's crazy how many deep classes there are, but that only makes the positions that are more scarce more important though, that you hit on those.
Yeah. His family was actually on my flight on the way back, and I was talking to them. I was like, your son's a baller. Like, he definitely got him some money, and they agreed with me. He had like that DJ Swearinger kind of ball hawk mentality, just go get it. So we'll definitely be talking about him because we're definitely going to be doing another episode after this with defensive guys because we do need some help there also. But I'm going to turn it to the running backs. And this was a weird class to me too because it wasn't like a ton of big names. Obviously, like Najee Harris was there, but he wasn't, doing all the practices and playing in the game and stuff like that. But I wrote down 3 names. 2 were running backs, and 1 guy is a hybrid. I know Adam knows. I'm sure Nate knows who I'm talking about too. But Khalil Herbert, Virginia Tech running back. Not sure how much y'all got to see him throughout the season. Obviously, being a Virginia boy, and I'm in a group chat with a diehard UVA and Virginia Tech fan. It's miserable. But I watched a good bit of Tech ball this year. And Khalil Herbert, to me, was just like that bowling ball type running back, hard to bring down, great balance. He measured in 5'9", 205. Like, to me, that kicks Peyton Barber to the curb. Peyton Barber being Peyton Barber kicks it to the curb.
Buddy, I could kick Peyton Barber to the curb. So, funny story about Herbert. He actually started his college career at KU, where I went to school, and I've gotten to see him play in person many times. He was really good at KU. I mean, there's going to be 2 KU running backs drafted this year, Puka Williams and Khalil Herbert. But Khalil Herbert made the right decision to transfer because I would not stay at KU, and he made out like a bandit there because you're talking about maybe getting that early day 3 draft capital now. But Herbert's a good player. I mean, there's a lot of with the running back class. It's kind of interesting. Like I think like Harris is like above everyone else, but like after, Devontae Williams, there's a lot of, or Javonte Williams, I should say, there's a lot of question marks. Like who's that running back 4, 5, 6, 7? I mean, it's very close together. So Herbert could sneak up in there, be like the running back 7 or 8, maybe. Yeah. After Michael Carter and Javonte Williams is kind of just like a gray area. Like you said, anyone can really sneak in. But Khalil, I wrote down his stats for 2020, 154 rushes for almost 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns. But what I noticed, they actually had him on the kicking return squad a good bit at the Senior Bowl, which kind of surprised me because I didn't really see him do it too much in college. He might have, but I just didn't really see it. But I noticed he was a great blocker. He had great balance and vision. He wasn't the best catching back at Tech. Like he wasn't used a lot in the passing game. But to me, he was more of an inside runner, just a solid number 2 back at the next level. So that was one guy that stood out to me.
Adam, I'll go with you. What's one guy that caught your eye at the Senior Bowl that you could see fit in Washington? Because, I mean, let's be honest. Like, we have Gibson. J.D. McKissic's a good, solid back, but we could definitely use another one. We don't know what Bryce Love looks like. You know, we don't know. Hopefully Peyton Barber's gone. I mean, I'd say we can all agree that we don't want Peyton Barber here. We could use an extra back. J.D. McKissic, great weapon, great third down running back type guy, but we need a more solid running back too. So, Adam, what's one guy that stood out to you?
I wrote about him pre-game was Michael Carter from UNC, and he didn't disappoint.
Dude,
you know, you just look at his size, and he plays like a guy that's 5'11", 230, 225, not, you know, somebody that's nearly 15 pounds lighter and 2 inches shorter than that. But I really like him on the next. So I think he had himself a game. After that performance, I think we might be having him as, you know, behind the two top guys out of Alabama and Clemson. So right now he put himself in the discussion for, you know, a second round, third back taken. But Michael Carter, UNC, he just showed that, you know, his ability for yak, his vision, his patience. Again, we take just little solace in that game. But listen, I've watched 5 guys now on the defense and offensive side of the ball, UNC. Let me tell you guys, UNC is really kicking out some guys. They're grinding some receivers. Chaz Surratt, again, sorry to go back to the defense. He's a guy I wrote about too. Converted quarterback to linebacker. Second ACC in tackles in 2019. They are Daz Newsome, man. They are kicking out talent. So UNC is just one of these programs to really keep an eye on for the next couple of years, because they might be, you know, day 3 guys, but in the end, 3-4 years from now, we're going to be talking about a lot of these guys being starters in big time production. But man, UNC, Michael Carter, man, that guy's he's a dog, man.
Yeah, Howell looks like he could be a top pick next year. So, Donovan, that leads me to a question. How soon is too soon for Washington to draft a running back? It's not the biggest need on the team, obviously, but how soon is too soon? And, Nate, I see you grinning. Obviously, you're going to say 6th, 7th round, but Donovan, what's your answer?
Yeah, when I think of the running back group and when I think of a new running back in Washington, I think a lot to the Cleveland Browns. As much as I hate comparing anything to the Cleveland Browns, I look at the group they have in Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb and the offensive line they have. And I don't think Washington's O-line is up to that standard yet. I think it could be if you add the right pieces, you know, maybe in the draft, free agency. But I look at guys that you could add if the right one is there. I don't think, you know, round 3 is too high. I don't know if the right one will be there in round 3, but I'm thinking to the future a little more of, okay, what's the quarterback situation like? And whoever it is, how much are they going to benefit from having, you know, a 2-headed monster like Cleveland does or other teams around the league does? And I really do think that if you find the right guy, especially that kind of workhorse power back, you know, round 3 isn't too early to pull the trigger on him.
I agree. Nate, I'm not going to ask you because I don't want to know. I'm just kidding. Who was one guy that stood out to you at the Senior Bowl that really piqued your eye, even though he's a running back?
Yeah, so when we talk about change of pace back, honestly, I want the running back 3 to be a guy who can take on a big workload if Antonio Gibson got hurt. You can't do that with J.D. McKissic. You can't do that with Michael Carter either. That's not the type of back he is. You have to get a guy who's going to be a bell cow but can also catch passes. So that kind of narrows it down a little bit. Someone I'm kind of interested in is Gainwell from Memphis that no one's talking about.
You just took my guy, man. I'm just about to talk about my Memphis guy.
Yeah, sorry, Gainwell, ironic. So he's a better running back than Antonio Gibson was at Memphis. It wasn't even close. I mean, he stole his job. That's why they moved him to receiver. Ironically, the funny thing with Gainwell is he needs to gain more weight. So we'll see what happens when he weighs in. But that's his biggest concern. But if he has enough weight, I mean, he's going to fit right in there as like running back 5 or something like that. But so if you're talking about someone at the Senior Bowl though, Felton was awesome. So he started off at. Yeah, I mean, he started off, he played running back behind Joshua Kelly at UCLA. He wasn't a very good running back. He didn't have good vision. He didn't really have good contact balance. He went down after first contact a lot, but he was an awesome route runner. And obviously they don't use too many different routes. Like you're using a lot of like Texas swing passes, screens, stuff like that. But at the Senior Bowl, he was running like receiver routes and he was running them better than a lot of the other receivers there were. I mean, they asked him, Yeah, I mean, he was running like corner routes. He was running out of the slot. He was running the full gambit of a route tree as a running back. So sometimes that can work to your detriment. Like teams don't know what to do with you. But if he goes to the right team, they can find a role for him. I mean, you look at a guy like Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler came from Western University. If you guys can tell me where that is, I would give you $100.
Somewhere out west.
Yeah, well, yeah. Congrats. But I mean, he's a guy who we wouldn't have known about until he went to the Senior Bowl. But he showed the ability to catch passes and worked his way up, and now he has a contract extension. So I like Felton because he can do a variety of things. He can be kind of a Swiss Army knife. But again, I wouldn't take most of these running backs, man. I wouldn't take where they're going. I wouldn't waste draft capital in the second or third round on a running back if I don't have to. I mean, you can find every year this happens. You get James Robinson as a drafted free agent. You get Philip Lindsay. Like you don't need to spend a lot of draft capital. You need good players, but you can find them in any round and still get the same production you will as a first rounder like Najee Harris.
Yeah, I agree. And Felton was the other guy that I wrote down. To me, I wrote down he was the opposite Gibson. Running back turned wide receiver. Gibson was wide receiver, turned running back, obviously, but he definitely ran some of the better routes at the Senior Bowl. Like when I was watching the practice tapes, I was like, all right, who is this guy? And then when I found out that he was converted, I was like, there's no way. Like UCLA, like I don't know what they were doing in the offense, but this guy should have been playing wide receiver. Like he just looked like a natural to me. He was he measured in at 5'8.5" at 185. So hopefully he bulks up a little bit. 185 small for anyone, even Devontae Smith, but. Few notes I wrote down was he was dynamic with his agility, great body control, and we could run him in the slot. We could actually have some run-in plays with him, kind of like how we did with Sims against the Patriots last year that he took to the house. But I think that's something else we can agree on. Even though he's a Kansas guy, Nate, I think it's time that Washington finds a better slot receiver option and a punt and kick return guy, and Felton could do that too. Practice, they had him returning punts and kicks. I know Adam had another guy that stood out that people have possibly the second round now with Eskridge. So talk about him a little bit, Adam, because that was the name that came out to everybody all week long was Dwayne Eskridge.
Like I said, if we're talking about he's been in college a long time. He's switched back.
He's like what, 30?
Something like that, from DB to
he's
wide
as old
receiver.
as Devontae Smith is.
Yeah, three times he's had that conversion. But the thing is, I love about him, I love what he does in the blocking game, and I think if we're talking about Washington possible fits, I don't want to reach on him. I think he's a value guy. Like you see somebody, if somehow, some way he slips into the third, which I don't see it, that's a really good value pick right there. I just don't like him. Probably in my first two rounds because I like his blocking ability, but as far as pure talent, around those rounds, I think if you're not talking about one of the big guys, you're definitely reaching. We keep talking about the depth of receiver in this draft, Jalen Darden, mid-round, late round. There's so many guys I don't feel if you're going to have to reach. So I really think free agency, we're going to see them go semi-big at receiver. So it's going to be that slot. So I think as Washington fans, I've pretty much put a lot of the X guys and Z guys to the side. I'm really focused on the slot guys. You brought up Eskridge, but the guy that stood out to me, I wrote him pregame, and he stepped up in the game, was Shi Smith from South Carolina. Debo Samuel was his mentor. Nowhere as big as Debo, but man, he plays like Debo. He just plays tough. He'll take the hits, he'll go over the middle. I see that guy as a perfect kind of slot in Washington to complement McLaurin. So Eskridge is a good one too, but I think Shi Smith is probably somebody you can get better value probably in the third round, maybe even fourth.
Yeah, I was with you, Adam, going into the game and just watching practice tapes. I wasn't watching too much of the big guys. Obviously, Tylan Wallace and Sage Trott, I wanted to see them and see how they perform because, if we do miss on a big free agent name, then we still need that wide receiver to complement. But the free agent, wide receiver class is so big. Like we have to get somebody.
They're going to get a Z. They're going to get a Z. And that's what I'm saying. There's so many prospects to go through. If we sit here and go through all the X's, Z's, and slots, we're going to get close to draft time, and you're not going to get to the other positions of need. So that's why I think just narrow it down for slots. If Washington fans, just a message out there. I think that's what you should do right now. If you're really looking, who's the guys, who are we looking at? Focus on the slots. Focus on those day 2, day 3 guys, because I think that's where we have a lot of value in this draft.
Yeah, I will say there was 2 guys that I wrote down I really want to talk about, and it's not like the popular, yes, Amari Rodgers is a beast.
Yeah.
Absolute stud, catches everything. He flashed every time he was on the field. Love Amari Rodgers, even though he's a Clemson, player. Hate Clemson, obviously, but Mari was phenomenal. Same with Cornell Powell. Both those Clemson guys were awesome. But one guy that stood out to me, another smaller school, to some people it's small school, to guys like us it's not, UAB wide receiver Austin Watkins. Great kid, ball hawk. He measured in 6'1.5", 207, just a huge big play threat, averaged almost 20 yards per catch at 57 catches at UAB. Like, put up huge numbers, great ball skills, high-level vision, tracked the ball at every single play, made 50-50 contested catches look more like 80-20, to be honest with you. If you watch this guy's tapes, if there's any chance of catching the ball, he will find a way. I talked to him after the game, actually, and honestly, one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my life. I mean, Adam, like, we've talked to a couple of players, like, interviewed, stuff like that, and some of them, like, they stand out. They're, like, good guys. Some of them feel entitled. You know, their character isn't the best, I will say that, but this guy just flashed me. He's like, yes, sir. Thank you for coming to the game. Thank you for watching me. It's a pleasure. Like, thank you. Like, just, yes, sir. Just, you're like, dude, like, I'm just a fan, like, that was taking your pictures and
You're
like,
no, sir.
watching the game. Like, yo, just call me Josh, like, for real. But no, but he was just like that. Like, he just stood out to me. You can tell he's a great guy, came from a great background. But if we don't get a big name guy, and even if we do, like, we don't know what AGG looks like. We don't know how Harmon's going to look coming back. It wouldn't surprise me if we got like a mid-round guy like Austin Watkins. But the more I watched his tapes, and especially practice at the Senior Bowl, this guy was smoking everybody, every contested catch he got. So definitely recommend y'all checking him out. They didn't. He only played 7 games in 2020. Didn't put up the biggest numbers, but in 2019, like I said, he had 57 catches for almost 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. But it was just fun to watch. All my buddies that were there all week were like, "Dude, check this guy out. He's been killing it all week." Went back to the hotel, watched like 2 or 3 games for UAB, and I was like, all right, this guy is no joke. So highly recommend checking him out. Donovan, what was a wide receiver that stood out to you that you could definitely see coming to Washington?
You know, I really like Amari Rodgers, like you mentioned. You know, he made himself some good money. I think to the slot in the next league. Yeah. One thing I was thinking about watching him and, you know, kind of going back and watching his tape a little bit was I wish Justin Ross was on the field to, you know, kind of take some of that pressure off Amari Rodgers. I think that if he had, you know, another big time receiver like I think Ross is, you know, demanding at least more attention from the defense, I think we would have seen even more from Amari Rodgers. And I think we would talk about him as a more, you know, mid-second round pick. I could see him going, you know, 3rd, 4th round, maybe later. You know, there's always, you know, kind of draft day slides like we saw last year, like with KJ Hill. In my opinion, he went way lower than I thought. Amari Rodgers is a guy. Nico Collins, too, out of Michigan. Really like him.
Yeah, Maury.
I was going to say, sorry, Rodgers reminds me a lot of Deebo Samuels and Golden Tate. Obviously a light version, like he didn't have nowhere near the good like college production that those guys did. But as far as like stylistically, he kind of plays like a combination of both of them. He's a bit of a bowling ball when he gets the ball. He's not going to go down after first contact. He runs pretty precise routes. Like he's not going to be a big time deep threat, but I think what Adam was talking about, like it's really deep at slot, right? There's like a bunch of dudes that can play in the slot on day 2 and day 3. So I think that, and that position in general is easier to find, which makes like an outside receiver far more scarce and far more valuable to me. Cause like, I mean, it's harder to find those guys. There's not a lot of them in this draft, and there are a lot as free agents, but I can't see any top free agents coming here. That's just my opinion right now, but that could change, I guess.
Yeah, this for sure, especially at the Senior Bowl alone. I mean, you talk about him. Another guy I liked a lot, Cade Johnson from South Dakota State. He was a guy I had on my radar going into the game. I probably watched him the most out of anyone, to be honest with you. Measured in 5'10", 186, so definitely a smaller guy. Slot wide receiver. Didn't do any punt returns at South Dakota, which was kind of weird to me because he did a ton of kick returns. But they didn't have a 2020 season because he's FCS, obviously. But in 2018, he had 67 catches for 1,332 yards, 17 touchdowns. 17. In 2019, he had 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. And to me, his footwork, when I'm watching one-on-ones, and Nate, we were kind of talking about this, in practice, especially at something like the Senior Bowl, one-on-one, stuff like that, the wide receiver has the advantage because he has the whole field to play with. The defense, the DB, it's just one-on-one. He has no help in the back. It's just all free run for the wide receiver pretty much, and the DB just has to keep up. That's pretty much how it goes.
And you're a defensive back. You don't know like what scheme you're playing. You're not like, I'm playing cover 3. I'm playing man. I'm playing the flat. Like you have no idea. Yeah, it's like unfair. It's like 90-10 in favor of the cornerback. So if you see a cornerback step up and play well in those drills, that's a bigger indicator on them than it is like the receiver a lot of times.
Yeah. Right. But the one thing I like to watch is just their release. I like to see how they run the routes. I just like to see their technical, standpoint. And to me, Cade, it had the quickest feet. He had the best routes to me, best get off. He created separation right away. That's one thing I know you're big on, Nate, is, at the next levels, can you create separation? Right. Like, contested catches is one thing. Does he have the biggest wingspan? No. Will he be able to make contested catches down the field? Who knows? But to me, if you can get that separation in that first second or two, you're doing that first move off the line and you're already getting separation. Like, that's what matters to me. And that's what caught my eye for Cade. He's a late round guy, probably 6th round, maybe even like 7th round, just because the wide receiver class is so deep. But made himself known, had the best catch in all the practices with that one-hander on the left sideline. Had everybody going off that day. So he definitely moved his stock up, got some money this weekend. But I like those smaller school guys, and we need help. Like I said, Sims is gone, in my opinion. I'm sorry, Nate, but I know he might be your guy because he's from Kansas. But he's disposable.
I was never high on him. I thought it was cool he made the team, and that was exciting. But, It's like I talk about. You have a bunch of undrafted free agents. You shouldn't expect anything from them. The fact that Cam Sims and Steve Sims are playing so much speaks to how terrible the depth is on our roster. So the fact that they're even like playing is like more power to them. So it's more indictment on the past coaching staff and front office that these guys are starting for us.
Yeah, and people talk about, they'll like maybe step up next year. Like I feel like we have completely maxed out both of those guys.
Yeah.
Steven Sims, undrafted wide receiver. We've maxed him out. Like, don't expect him to just turn into, this new wide receiver all of a sudden. Like, we've seen what he can do. And the inconsistency is there. Same with Cam. He's been here for 4 or 5 years now. Yeah, he played better this year, but I feel like that was the ceiling. Like, it's not going to get better than that. So, obviously, we could talk about guys like Sage Surratt, Tylan Wallace. There's so many wide receivers that represented the Senior Bowl. Donovan mentioned Nico Collins. Loved him. For his size, he was fast. Mm-hmm. That's a bigger dude, bigger possession guy, but he talked about separation. Like, he got it quick, too. So, loved Nico. Des Fitzpatrick had a crazy catch during the game. Great job high pointing a lot of catches. But was there anyone else that y'all want to talk about wide receiver-wise that kind of stood out that you could see as a possibility in Washington?
Marquez Stevenson, Houston. Oh, yeah. That guy's a burner. I think if we ever get an official speed, just by look, I was watching some of his games yesterday.
Yes.
That's a guy that can run 4.28, 4.3 flat. He's that fast. So, but he's not a guy you're getting early. Like that's a guy that maybe 5th round, 6th round, or even later. That's a guy that you can get on returns. You can get as your 4th wide receiver in 4 wide receiver packages. That's not your plan, but that's a guy that I like because I like the idea of just upgrading the slot, upgrading speed on this team, and he's a guy that I could see later. But, you mentioned the other guy, Fitzpatrick. He's another guy. But I guess that's why I keep coming back to the slots because I see the most speed, the most agility, guys that I think their abilities translate early to the next level because we said Steven Sims Jr., they talked to Ron Rivera. He was pretty much already moving on from what he sounded like. So I think all the acquisitions you've seen, practice squad, Foster and free agency, they're definitely looking at a kind of mold. And I think it's not just to have one slot guy. I think you're going to see an offense with McLaurin. They're going to have an AGG, Cam, whoever that 6'3", guy. But then I think they want to sprinkle in a lot of those slot smaller guys. So I think not getting one, I think getting 2 or 3 kind of speed guys like that is the best way to make Turner's offense roll because like I said, if you just watch what he's trying to do, a lot of the sideline flat passes, that has a lot to do with necessity. There's no separation in the middle, so they're given what they're being taken. That's why I think getting a tight end next to Jones, I'm a Pitts guy. There's no way I see him dropping, but I think you can complement him with a couple late round guys. Going off a little bit, the kid out of Bowling Green, you got the great pictures from him, Josh. Yeah, I was going to say Morris, man. Too. He was another guy I wrote a pregame about that. I just thought late round guy, H-back, tight end, just the kind of guy I think that would really work well in Turner's system because we saw how they were moving Logan Thomas around in the back. I like him doing that, but I like him going out and flexing more. So I'd like to have that guy like Morris where we can keep him down in the box. We can move him around the line. He's a decent inline blocker, not great. But we saw, he's a thick body. He could do some things as a second tight end. So I think when you have those kind of tight ends, you can sprinkle in some speed and really just take advantage of a defense, really target on Terry McLaurin.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, I know Donovan is ready to talk about the big uglies and wax poetic on a few guys, but if I could jump on a soapbox real quick and say, what if there was a receiver that people are projecting to go in the first round? And what if I told you this same receiver has been arrested, has gotten in trouble for having an assault rifle in the back of his car, has had multiple team suspensions? I'm not saying he did any of those things. It was all alleged. But
he didn't go to Alabama.
He didn't go to Alabama, but you can at least say there's some sort of character concerns or questions when he wasn't being a rapper, which I have no problem with being a rapper. That's awesome. I'd be doing the same thing. You got to work on your brand. But there's been concerns about him being more interested in music than like playing football. Right. And then what if I told you on top of that, he didn't produce his freshman year, his sophomore year, his junior year? But hey, guess what? He played quarterback in high school. And I know people are going to say that.
Are you talking about Tony? Are you talking about Tony?
I'm talking about
the last mixtape Warrior 2. It's out now, guys.
Did you listen to it?
I did not.
Is that Tony we're talking about? I didn't know about any of this actually.
That's Kadarius Toney. By the way, he didn't produce or do anything for 3 seasons.
I know.
He didn't break out until he was 21 years old. Yes. And he broke out with the Heisman candidate quarterback, Pitts, Grimes. I mean, it's insane that he should be talked about in the first round. Receiver that goes in the first round who doesn't have early production, it's an automatic red flag. Throw that up. I mean, like, no offense, Josh, but doesn't that kind of remind you of a guy from Alabama last year who, like, the reason he didn't produce early is because there's so many good players around him and he wasn't sure what he could do yet. I mean, it's insane to me that he's going that early. Like, he should be wide receiver 6 or 7. And I'll debate with anyone about it. Like
he slipped. You know what? No, Nate. Fair enough. I had him high before too. But the more receivers I go through, I'm not even like you said. I'm dropping him now because of that. But the receivers that I've been watching, he's starting to drop back. Even a late round guy like Darden. I can't switch him as far as draft position. But who do I want more right now? I want a guy like Darden over a guy like Tony, and not even for the reasons you said. Yeah. Just a dynamic by producing year in and year out. That's what I want.
Yeah, if you can't beat up, and Donovan knows this, like if you're 18 and you're supposed to be a first-round pick and you can't beat defensive backs that are 21, 20, 22 years old, and you can't beat up on them, and it takes until you're 21 or 22 to beat up on freshmen and sophomore, that's always going to be a red flag. It's always going to be a red flag that you don't break out till you're 21. And I don't care what anyone says. Like, it's a fact. Like, I understand he's getting all the hype and everything, and I've seen all the highlights. I've watched tape on him. He's great. He does some fantastic start and stop ability, but he shouldn't.
He's not a route runner. He's not a route runner.
He was great in traffic, and he was hard to get down. Like, that's one thing that stood out is like when he was in a traffic jam, like it looked like he was going to go down, he busted out. But how is that? Like, how can you measure that at the next level though?
It's hard. It's extremely
all those other guys do that though. Amari Rogers does that. I mean, like there's Elijah Moore does that. I could name you 7 other receivers that do the same thing. Maybe they're not quite as athletic as he is, but like comparing him to Tyreek Hill is such a slap in the face. Hill, in my opinion,
that's a reach.
But I'll get off my soapbox because I want to hear Donovan talk about offensive linemen. So
now I will say I talked to Tony for literally like 2 minutes before the game because some guy he knew was literally staying beside me. So I just talked to him a little bit. Didn't seem like, I just talked to the guy for 2 minutes, but I tried to like ask him some questions like, what do you want to work on the next level? And he said like he wanted to work on his routes and stuff like that a little bit more, just crisper off the line, stuff like that. But
that's true. And I'm like
you said, people are saying about, no.
Yeah. With route running, like I don't think route running is as important as people say it is. I think it matters, but I think that's something that can be coached. And like even Kyle Shanahan said that. He said route running is the least of my concerns with receivers. It's their God-given ability. There's things that some other people can't do, and that's why he liked Brandon Ayuk so much. Right. And I think people think about that with Tony, but the difference is Ayuk produced in community college. He produced when he came, and played at Arizona State. Same thing with Laviska Shenault. They're guys who produced everywhere they went. If you don't produce in college, how are you going to produce in the pros? That's what I want to know.
But if you come into a league running routes like Justin Jefferson right away. I think you can kind of separate yourself. So,
yeah.
Anyways, we'll stop talking about wide receivers because we could literally do a whole episode on that alone. There's literally like 30 at the Senior Bowl that I would love to have. Like I said, Clemson's pumping out a bunch of them too. T. Higgins last year. Like I said, Justin Ross, Cornell Powell this year. But Amari Rodgers is definitely someone to take a look at. So, good picks there. So, let's start with the big guys. Donovan. Sure. I know this excites you, man. Obviously, there's a lot of beer guts in Mobile, Alabama. A lot of meat on those lines, especially Deontay Brown measured in 7'8", 500 pounds. Like, one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen in my life. Vince Wilfork is the biggest guy I've ever seen in person. And Deontay Brown gave him a run for his money. So, what was the one guy that stood out to you in Mobile?
Obviously Quinn Miners really stood out. I mean, it said enough. Seeing his film and seeing how he performed the week, not just good. I mean, he had elite technique and fundamentals with his hand usage, with his footwork, and that's something with O-line that no matter what level you play at, it's going to translate, to whatever next level that is, as long as you have, generally good strength and generally good athleticism. You don't need to be a freak on the offensive line, but if you have that, that elite technique and hand usage like he did, it's going to translate. Another name that really stood out, James Hudson, Cincinnati left tackle.
So raw. He can do so much with them.
Yep. He reminds me of a more athletic, but he's small. I think he's about 6'5", like 305, 310. So he's a little smaller and not as much of a mauler as kind of the project Morgan Moses was. And I think that if he was in the right fit and the right system for about a year, he can develop into, a above average, middle tier kind of left tackle. He's got that athleticism. I mean, he's got a mean streak to him.
Wasn't he a former tight end though? I'm trying to remember.
He's
if that's
only
what
been
I'm
playing
thinking.
Offensive line in like 1 year.
I know. I like him. I couldn't remember his name, but yeah, I remember for the tight end. Yep, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, he stood out to me. Quinn Miners, you love seeing he's D3.
Yeah.
And when you come in and you get the respect of people the way that he did, not just with his beer belly, but just working dudes. There was a play where Shaka Toney hit him with the spin move, and he just spun him around, grabbed him, and just threw him on the ground, just bodied him. And everyone was like, ooh, like everyone was getting hyped. Like he made Shaka Toney look terrible all week. But not even just him, like the kid from Sample from Tulane, just killing everybody. So I love those D3 guys. Another small school guy, Reduns, North Dakota State, one of the best offensive line in the whole country last year. Not even just FCS level. I'd say top 3 in the nation last year. They're pumping dudes out, helping out Trey Lance. What's another guy that you've been watching?
They're the Alabama of Division III. They really are.
Yeah, they're literally. You see, Alex Leatherwood underperformed to me. I'll just knock out the Alabama guys real quick. Wasn't bad, but I just wanted to see a little bit more. Got beat a little bit more than I expected. Yep. Deontay Brown, like I said, caught everyone's eye just because how big he is. He's going to be a stud at the next level. First-round draft pick, hands down. Landon Dickerson, just fun being around. Obviously, he didn't do anything because he's hurt, but just laughing the whole time, smiling. Same with Quentin Miners, just a blast. Seeing him walk around, just goofing off with guys and people just messing with him, slapping his belly, stuff like that. Just loving the game. Everybody down there was. But what's a guy, Nate, that you've been looking at for the O-line?
I think Quinn Miners, obviously you talked about him already, but the fact that he wasn't even going to be invited until Dickerson went out is amazing. And then you throw that together, he probably had the best practice reps of any O-lineman there. And on day 3, he breaks part of his hand. By the way, that his right hand that he uses to snap the ball as a center, and he still played. I mean, he still played in the game. So that shows a certain level of grit and toughness. And we've seen some Division III offensive linemen come into the league and play well look at Tampa Bay right now with Marpet. I mean, they have some damn good players that came out of nowhere. So it's cool to see it. And I love to see the technical refinement that comes. Like a lot of these guys are raw. Give them a year or so to develop, and it's crazy how much they can learn about hand placement and everything. But I mean, another guy I really liked is, oh God, I'm spacing on the name right now. The OU center. What is his name?
Creed Humphrey?
Creed Humphreys. Yeah, he's not going to overpower anyone, but he's such a technician. Like you can just tell, like he's seen everything as a center, and he always like his foot placement is just awesome. Like he's seen everything as a center. Yeah, it really comes to fruition on the field when he plays. So he's someone you expected that out of him, but he really met expectations. I felt like.
To me, that was like Drake Jackson. He was really small. He was smaller than what people said. He measured in like 15 pounds lighter than like what Kentucky website had him at, which is normal. Like they usually influx. numbers, but that was a little too much. So he came in undersized. Still looked pretty good, but like you said, technical guy. This whole offensive line class was actually pretty dang good. You have obviously the ones that we talked about. Trey Smith from Tennessee, another top guy. Talked about Drake. Who else was I going to talk about? Somebody else. David Moore.
That's my guy.
Yeah.
That's my
Adam,
guy.
I wanted to bring him up because you have a connection to David Moore. Had the biggest family fan base at the game. They took up like 4 sections. They all had his shirt on. It was like his logo. They were going nuts the whole time. So I talked to his family a little bit after the game too. Just told them I told them, talk about Adam, stuff like that, how they talked to him. So tell us a little bit about David.
I'm still doing all my film on him. I'm going to have a eval article coming out on him. First, HBCU invite to the Senior Bowl from Grambling. He's a guy that you're going to look at first. He's 6'1", I think he's around 315, around about. I have to look up the exact numbers. But what I love about him is his low center of gravity. I'll admit it, just like anybody else, offensive lineman is an eval that I'm still getting through. It's very difficult, as you guys know. But he's a guy, every time I saw him on film, he's just popping. There's that YouTube clip out when he knocks the guy down on the ground. He just follows. As soon as that guy starts to get up, he follows through and just slams him back on the ground. He is a dog. There's a reason he has a silverback on his Twitter feed, but I love him. Like I said, 6'1", 315, people are going to shy away from that as a potential left guard, but that's where he goes. And I think as a potential late day 3 guy, he's a good fit in Washington. Just, we can put the Doug Williams connections aside. But he's just that guy.
Yeah,
like
they've talked multiple times. Like I've seen videos of them together.
That matters because every year, we can even go back to Jay Gruden. He fell in love with Matt Ioannidis, and he went to, and this is well documented, he went to the scouting department and said this. And I've heard multiple things. I'm trying to, find more, talk to more people. It's been very hard this year. Every year it's been pretty easy to get in touch with coaches and players. This year's been difficult. But I'm trying to figure out, any more dialogue. But do not be surprised if, he's got that, puts in a good word, and we see that guy as a late round. So I'll definitely have an eval coming out with him soon, more on him. But David Moore Grambling, man, he's definitely a left guard sleeper late in the draft.
Yeah, and we don't know what's going to happen with Sheriff, obviously demanding some big money, all-pro guy. Obviously, he's going to need to get paid or tagged. And then depth. Sadiq Charles, we expect a lot out of him. Didn't do anything first season because of injuries. And you just never know. Guys go down.
Right.
So you can't just, plug in some random guys in offensive lineman. When it comes to the O-line, consistency is the best thing. Because you know what's right beside you, who's beside you, you know what they can do and what they can't do.
Right.
So I think we definitely go O-line somewhere in this draft. It doesn't have to be early. I think it's really hard to tell with this new regime of players how much we're going to do BPA in the draft. Best players available. Like, do you pass up on the guy because you don't really need that position?
So like a perfect example, you have Darsal from Virginia sitting there. You plug and play him. Or do you have, let's not go Tony, but, let's say another guy happens to slip, a big-time receiver, a big-time cornerback. What do you do? I think one thing that we've seen from Ron Rivera in Carolina, if it's the scouting department of him, but they do not covet offensive linemen high. Mm-hmm. So I'm not expecting to see them go offensive linemen too high, maybe second. But I think in free agency, they'll go aggressive. In first round, it's going to be offensive skill player, because I think one thing that they can take from this season is maybe a player or two on defense will really help them get to that potential elite status. But offense, they're so far away that they have to put so much into that. So I think early round, they're going to definitely go some kind of offensive skill players, tight end, receiver, something like that.
Yeah, Adam, I think you nailed it there, because the big thing when you watch your offense, whenever they put a drive together, it's very methodical. Yep. It's 10 yards. It's a bunch of minor plays. They have no explosion. They're not able to stretch the field at all because they don't have a deep threat outside of McLaurin, who you can bracket. Right. So they really need a guy who can stretch the field, and then they need guys underneath who can win quickly and create separation and then win after the catch. So that's going to be huge. But I was going to say with offensive line, and Donovan could probably speak to this a little bit, but the big thing I value for rookies is guys who can go from offensive tackle to offensive guard if things don't work out as tackle. So guys like Vera Tucker, someone from USC or someone like that. I really like players who can play multiple positions and move around on the line. That's a big thing Andy Reid does with the Chiefs, is all of his guys, they can play guard, they can play tackle. So that's something I always prioritize.
I think there's a lot of versatility in the draft of this O-line. I mean, even if you look at the top end guys Rashawn Slater is not going to be anywhere near Washington, at pick number 19 if that's where they stay.
He's awesome.
But he's a guy that can play anywhere, on the O-line minus center. Not a lot of guys can switch from outside to center, but there's a lot of versatility. I think some people at the Senior Bowl were Josh, you probably speak more to this. I think they were moving Trey Smith a little bit around than Alex Leatherwood. Kind of inside at guard a couple times and flip-flop and back and forth. I think sometimes people overthink it, especially with those two. I mean, Trey Smith
is Leatherwood for sure.
Yeah. Trey Smith is a mauler. I don't think you need to overthink that. He's going to be a quality guard. And I think Alex Leatherwood is, I don't think he's too far behind, the top two tackles. Now, don't get me wrong, those two I think are in their own class. But Alex Leatherwood, I think he is about as close to plug and play as you're going to find in the draft.
Yeah, I wasn't too fond of them moving him around like they did. I think that kind of actually did hurt him a little bit because I was listening to other guys' podcasts, like the Draft Network, their draft dudes, and they kind of said the same thing. Then my guys that just haven't really seen too much of just Alex Leatherwood were focusing on him and said the same thing. They kind of expected more. But I think, like you said, I think he's going to be one of the top tackles in the draft. But it was this offensive line draft in general has turned out to be better than expected. Earlier on, people were saying it was kind of top-heavy, wasn't too much depth going on. It's really started to build out more, especially after the Senior Bowl. We say how much, weight comes out of the Senior Bowl, like how much do you actually get out of it. The offensive line class definitely got better coming out of Mobile. I feel a lot better about it. The last out, just to round it out, tight ends wasn't the craziest draft class, but one guy really stood out to me. Adam, you kind of mentioned one guy too. But Hunter Long, out of Boston College, looked up some more stuff with him. He actually led all tight ends in the nation in targets with 89 last year. That's a lot. That was 22 more than the guy that finished second. He had 57 catches, 685 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Boston College's offense is usually that run heavy, with A.J. Dillon before he came out, just pretty boring. But I forgot what the quarterback's name is. It's crazy. Forgive me. It's drawn a blank, but he's a stud, and they're leaning towards more of a pass-heavy offense, and that shows when you're throwing 89 passes to your tight end in a season. But he was a great blocker in all the practices, great hands, didn't drop much of anything, great routes for a guy that big. He was a lot faster in person than I thought he was going to be. 6'5", 254 especially. I thought he was going to be much slower than that, but turned out to be a great receiving threat. They had him projected as a solid tight end 2 in a 12 personnel, could possibly turn out to be a tight end 1 in a system like that. Adam, I know you mentioned your guy from Bowling Green. I actually talked to him on Instagram after the game. I sent him his pictures, and he said he's down to come on the podcast sometime.
That'd be great.
Yeah, try to get him on. Another small school guy. But have you done too much, evaluating with Quentin, or where are you at on him?
I just really started. I'm going to have a feature on him. Hopefully we can get together. So, exactly, awesome. maybe talk. But again, I just love his versatility. You'll see a trend if you read any of my articles, especially my Senior Bowl, is I love versatility. I love guys that can play multiple positions. You'll see I listed the names are really long. So the kid from Syracuse, kid from Florida State, both safety hybrids. I really like guys that can play multiple positions. And Quentin Morris, like I said, he came in as a receiver. They tried to use that big wide receiver mold and then just figured let's just start moving him around. And again, we haven't seen that traditional H-back really so far this year return his system, but I did see a lot more in the last 3 games that he coached in Carolina. So again, to me, Quentin Morris is that perfect option. I'm with you. I like Long out of Boston College, but I'm looking for that more flex guy for the tight end 2. And Quentin Morris is a guy I liked, and even a guy who flashed a little bit was Kenny Yeboah, for tight end from Ole Miss, 6'4", 247.
Everyone was calling him Yeboah.
He's some good size, good athletic ability. That's what I'm really looking for. I think we can still find that good blocking tight end and solid tight end 3, late or even undrafted. But to get a playmaker that can spread the field, I think they really need that. And again, Quentin Morris, he's a guy. I hope we can talk much, but I have a lot coming out about him. I really loved what I saw prior to even the Senior Bowl. So that leap that he did, man, that just solidified me. Doing a full
that was my favorite moment of the game because I was like near the club. Not much action happened in our end zone, but that was one of them that I got really good pictures of that I sent over to him. When you're that big and you're hurdling linebackers like that, I was like, all right, this guy's legit. Nate, who was a tight end, if any, in the Senior Bowl class stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, big thing with tight end guys, and you guys know this better than I do. I don't watch as much college as you do, but tight ends aren't used the same way in college that they are in the pros a lot of times. Like in the pros, they really scheme open these guys and they use them more actively in the passing game. In college, it really just depends which school you go to if you're going to be used in that way. And on top of that, it's one of the hardest positions to learn because you have to learn run blocking, pass blocking, and you also have to learn how to run routes. It's a lot. That's why tight ends take a longer time to break out in the league. Like if you draft a tight end in round 1, round 2, round 3, it takes 2 or 3 years, and you see guys break out a lot later, age 29, age 30. Logan Thomas is like 29. So that's one thing just to keep in mind. You want guys who are pretty productive at an early age. Like we always talk about that. But another thing is like they need to run under a 4.8. That's like a big analytical threshold for tight end. And I know it's like 4.8 is not that fast, but for tight end, you gotta adjust for how big they are. But Hunter Long actually ran 4.5 in high school, which is amazing. When you think about how big he is, that's I don't even think Collins from Michigan is gonna run. Like I think he's gonna run a 4.5, like 4.8, 4.5, like a 4.59 or something like that. Yeah. So Long is impressive, and on top of that, he can block. But Uboa reminds me a little bit of like Jared Cook or OJ Howard in the sense that that's exactly
what I look at him as. Yep.
He's a vertical threat, but I mean, like he really just showed up against your boys Alabama, and that was it.
Yep.
And maybe part of that is just like their scheme or something like that. But this tight end class is pretty awesome. I really like Brevin Jordan. I think in any other year, Brevin Jordan would be the tight end 1, but just because Kyle Pitts is such a freak, I mean, people kind of forget about Jordan, but I like him just as much as Freiermuth. I like both of them, but I'm definitely, you got to look at tight end. I don't think Logan Thomas is like the answer. I understand like he had a big season. He's a good player, but he's really a tight end 2 playing a tight end 1. He's 100%. Getting older, and he's a willing blocker, but he's not a guy who's going to go out there and like pancake dudes the way like Jordan or someone like that does. And then on top of that, like he doesn't really have much of a vertical threat, and he doesn't get separation right away. The main reason he was so productive last year is like it's the target totem pole. The targets are so concentrated, and there's no one else that really demands targets. So yeah, he had a lot, but I mean he was a great find and he had an awesome season, but I wouldn't count on him to be like Rob Gronkowski or something like that. He's just he's a tight end 2 that's playing tight end 1.
Yeah, we definitely need that true tight end 1. But that wraps up the offensive side of the Senior Bowl. Definitely some good guys to keep an eye on as we get closer to the draft. But we're going to come back with another episode talking defense. Like I told these guys, we could probably do an all-night episode, just talk about just guys at the Senior Bowl alone. And yes, we have a good defense, but obviously there are some holes to fill. There's some question marks with guys like Darby. Nate, I know you've brought that up a couple times the last few weeks. You don't know. 49ers said interested in him. Who knows? We only have him on a 1-year deal, so he is a free agent. Definitely some holes we might have to fill and upgrade, like the linebacker spot. And there was a couple guys stood out to me in the linebacker spot that looked good. So we'll come back. But, gentlemen, it's been fun. We will see y'all next week.
LDC, guys. Take it easy.